Hi, Professor Rainford. My name is Curtis Wooderson, and I'm doing my oral presentation on welding. To become a welder, there's two ways that you can go about it. One, you can get a 2-year certificate at a school, or you could go on to get a 4-year degree, or you could go to specialty schools like the one down in Florida where you can learn how to underwater weld in about 16 weeks, which is hopefully what I'm going to be doing after I go to Jamestown. In welding, there are a couple basic things you need to weld. First of all are the clothes that you need to wear. You need to wear boots, jeans. Some people wear leather chaps over their jeans just so their jeans don't get burnt. Gloves that are for high temperatures. They make several different kinds. These are just one type. These are for stick welding and MIG welding. You need a jacket that is fire retardant. Some people wear leather. This is a polyester blend that is specially treated to be fire retardant. And a welding helmet. This one is an auto darkening helmet, which means when it senses the light, it turns dark, and it is adjustable from a 9 to a 13 shade depending upon the type of welding you're doing. The brighter the welding, the more the shades you want. This is a welder. This is a stick welder that is AC up to 225 amps. It has the negative ground, which you connect to the piece of metal that you are welding to, the stinger, which the electrode goes into, and the on-off switch, and this is the amperage adjuster. Depending upon the type of stick that you're using and what you're welding, you want the amperage to be higher or lower. This is just one type of stick. This is a 6013. This can be pretty much an all-around stick. It go from thick to thin metal and many different temperatures and weld in several different positions from horizontal to flat. Some of the tools you need for welding are a hammer and a chisel to clean off your weld, because there is a slag that comes up over the weld that protects it from the air while it cools down. You have to chip this off, and then after you get most of it chipped off, you have to brush it off to get it clean, because if you're welding over it again, then you don't want to get slag inclusions, which make the weld holey and it will not hold as good. There are several different types of welding, from underwater to ornamental to industrial. There's robotic welding, and the list just keeps going on and on. These are a couple of type of ornamental welds that I have done. This is a candle holder, and you take and use a pipe bender and you bend all this 1/4 inch rod here, and then I MIG welded it together, and then the couplings here are TIG welded on, which is also another type of welding, and then it's just spray painted, and this is a type of ornamental welding. This is one other project that I did. This is just a coffee table, and I used the same thing, a pipe bender, to bend all these, and a MIG welder to MIG them all in. But to put these washers on, I braze them. Brazing is a type of welding that you do with an oxyacetylene torch. You get both metals hot, and then touch the brazing rod to both metals, and you spread the braze around using the torch tip to point it where you want, and then it cools down and it holds it. This is more of a old school type welding. It's not really used anymore. The only thing you use it for pretty much are things that are very light that you cannot weld with MIG, stick, or TIG. There are many different types of metal that you could weld. This right here is cold rolled steel. That is just where it goes through a giant roller and there's water running on it all the time that makes it cold, and it's just rolled out and pressed out. Another type is hot rolled, which this is. It's just heated up and then rolled out. There's very little difference to them when you're welding. It's just the flexibility of them. The hot rolled is a little bit more flexible when it comes to you in the shop. It's just a little bit easier to work and make finer things out of. Other things that you can weld: sheet metal. You usually MIG that or TIG, which I do not have. It's more difficult to do with a stick welder, but some people can do it. And then it goes all through all the different types. Aluminum is pretty much only done with a TIG. And then cast iron, which is one of the hardest metals to weld, because you have to heat it up with an oxyacetylene torch first, and then you have to weld it, which makes things very difficult. All different types of industry use welding. Welding in industry is used from building bridges all the way to welding gas pipe underground to building cars. Most of the car welding is done by robotics, and it is just spot welding where one electrode comes down on top of the metal and the other comes on the bottom, and they just touch the metal and it's fused together through electricity. Pipe welders are some of the best paid welders out there because it is some of the hardest to weld, but if you go up on a skyscraper, they can start out at around $100 an hour and only go in there, and bridge guys make about the same amount of money. Water welding is where the most money's at. They start out at around $200 an hour and they just go up. They usually only have to work a couple months out of the year because it is so strenuous on their bodies. They go down to hundreds of feet in depth, and sometimes they have to stay down there for days on end in a little submarine-like thing that is pressurized to the depth that they have to go at because it's too hard on the body to come back up on the regular ship and then go back down there time after time. So they just stay down at that depth for a couple weeks if need be. But now I would ask the audience if they have any questions they'd like to ask me.
Yes, could you explain to us again how the arc welder works, exactly what you do and how it all comes about?
Yes.
How the weld comes out?
Yeah, I can do that. First, in the first step, you take the ground clamp here and connect it to the metal that you're welding, like this. But the metal would not be painted because you cannot weld painted metal because it has to be metal to metal contact with the ground clamp. Then you would take this electrode and a stick here, or the stinger and the electrode, put the electrode into the stinger. There's many different ways you can put the electrode into the stinger depending upon the type of welding that you're doing. For something like this, you would probably just put it in coming straight out. Then you would adjust your amperage. For this rod and this metal, it'd probably be right around 90 amps, and then you would turn the welder on. Then you would put your helmet on and securely fasten it to your head along with your gloves. And then you put the electrode near the metal that you're welding and flip the helmet down so you know the abouts where you are. And when you touch the electrode to the metal, it'll make a blue spark, which will make the auto darkening helmet go dark. And then the electrode heats up both the metals, and the metal that is in the electrode fuses these two metals together by penetrating them, and it basically just melts them together at a very high temperature and uses the metal in the electrode to fill in the gaps. On the outside of the electrode there is a flux that will cover the weld after it has burned off the stick, and it covers the weld. This is to protect it from getting contaminated by the air while it cools down, and it just makes for a better, neater looking weld. Does that explain your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Now I'd like to conclude by saying that the reason that I got into welding is because it's not so much that it's a dying art. Welding is very much thriving, but it's just there's no welders because it is a blue-collar job and nobody likes doing this type of work anymore, and that's why it's such an extremely high-paying job. And where I'd like to go in welding is after I get my 2-year certificate, I would like to go down to Florida for the underwater school, which is a 16-week program, and you get completely certified for underwater welding, which is the most dangerous type of welding to do, but also on the other hand it's the most high paid. And from there I would go out to a shipyard and weld on ships that are in port, or I could go and work on underground oil lines or on oil rigs, and the possibilities are just endless from there. Thank you very much.